The encounter. The air inside the alien palace was heavy and silent. The human explorer, Daniel, stepped carefully through the tall doors that opened by mistake. He had never seen a place like this before, with walls that glowed softly and floors shining like glass. His heart beat faster, but his eyes were calm, always searching, always careful. He was not supposed to be here. The palace was forbidden, guarded by soldiers and machines, but a wrong turn inside the alien city had brought him into this strange hall. He told himself to stay quiet, to leave before someone saw him. Then he heard it, a soft sound, broken, trembling, almost like music but filled with fear. It was the sound of a child crying. Daniel followed the sound slowly, step by step, until he reached a corner of the hall. There, sitting on the floor, was a little girl. Her skin glowed faintly blue, her eyes wide and full of terror. She looked no older than 6 or 7, but she was not human. Her small hands covered her face and her shoulders shook as she tried to hide her sobs. Daniel froze. He had seen many alien species, but never a child like this. His first thought was to turn back, but the way she shook with fear pulled at his heart. He crouched down slowly, keeping his distance. "Hey," he whispered softly, though he knew she might not understand. The girl looked up for a second, her eyes glowing with tears, then quickly looked down again. She was terrified, not just of him, but of something bigger, something unseen. Daniel remembered something in his pocket. Not a weapon, not food, but a simple toy he carried for comfort. It was a small human device, used on Earth to blow bubbles. He had kept it from his little sister years ago when he left home. He held it up, showing the girl that it was harmless. She blinked at him, unsure, still shaking. Then very slowly, Daniel opened the cap, dipped the wand, and blew. A stream of shining bubbles floated into the air. They drifted like tiny worlds, glowing as they caught the palace light. The girl gasped softly, her fear pausing for the first time. She reached out with a trembling hand as one bubble touched her finger and popped. Her lips curved into the smallest smile, a fragile light breaking through her fear. Daniel smiled too, but he stayed gentle. He blew again, and this time, more bubbles filled the hall. The girl's eyes widened as she followed them. She stood up slowly, forgetting her tears, watching the colors dance around her. Her laughter came like a surprise, soft at first, then brighter. She chased one bubble, then another, her little feet moving lightly across the floor. Daniel felt his chest loosen, relief washing through him. He had no idea who she was, only that she was safe now, but he did not know the truth. High above, in the shadows of the hall, hidden behind tall pillars, another figure watched. The figure's eyes were sharp, glowing with power. It was the queen, the mother of the child, ruler of the alien empire. She had seen humans before, seen them as greedy, violent, dangerous. She expected this one to be the same, ready to harm her daughter. But what she saw instead was different. A human, kneeling, smiling, making simple bubbles to calm her child. Her heart was cold, her rule was strict, but this moment shook her. She said nothing, made no move. She only watched as her daughter laughed for the first time in many days, watched as a human, an outsider, brought peace where her guards and servants could not. Daniel had no idea that such powerful eyes were on him. He had no idea the child before him was not ordinary. He thought only that he had found a frightened girl who needed kindness, and so he kept blowing bubbles, letting them float higher, brighter, softer. The girl clapped her hands, her laughter ringing through the hall. She forgot her fear, forgot her loneliness, at least for this moment. Daniel felt the weight of the palace disappear as he watched her joy, but he did not see the shadow above him, the queen, watching in silence. The hall was quiet except for the girl's laughter and the sound of bubbles bursting. Every bubble that floated into the air carried a piece of hope. Every laugh of the child carried a piece of trust. And in that moment something began. Something fragile, something dangerous. Daniel thought he was calming a lost girl, but in truth he had stepped into the heart of an empire, and every action he took was being measured by the eyes of a queen. The encounter was only the beginning. The hidden queen, from the shadows above. The glowing hall she watched, her eyes sharp like blades, her presence heavy like thunder waiting to strike. She was the queen, ruler of 1,000 worlds, mother of the trembling child. No one dared breathe in her presence, not her guards, not her advisors, not even the air itself. Yet this human did not know she was there. He did not bow, he did not kneel. He did not even sense the storm above him. He only blew bubbles, simple, glowing bubbles. And her daughter laughed, a sound the queen had not heard in far too long. The queen's heart, once carved in stone by war and betrayal, trembled. For a moment this was not right, she thought. Humans were destroyers, bringers of chaos. They had stolen, invaded, crushed countless lives. And yet here was one, kneeling before her child, offering nothing but harmless air and light. She narrowed her eyes, her mind racing. "Is this a trick?" she whispered in her own tongue. Her voice echoed across the pillars like a warning. The guards near her shifted but did not move, waiting for her command. Down below, the child clapped her hands, chasing another bubble. Her laughter spread like fire, filling corners of the palace that had only known silence. The queen clenched her jaw, anger rising, not at the human, but at herself, for she could not deny the truth. Her daughter was happy. Her daughter felt safe, and it was because of him, a human, the one she should despise. The queen stepped forward from the shadow but did not yet reveal herself. Her cloak moved like liquid night. Her crown caught the faint glow of the hall. She wanted to test him, to see if this was a mask. Would he run if he felt her power? Would he draw a weapon? Would he betray the trust of her child? A single whisper from her lips could summon an army. A single gesture could turn the human to ash. But she stayed her hand. She wanted to see more. Daniel, still unaware, smiled as the girl tugged on his sleeve. She wanted more bubbles, more magic, more laughter. He nodded and gave her what she asked. To him, it was nothing. To her, it was everything. The queen's eyes softened for one heartbeat, then hardened again. She could not let her judgment be clouded. This was her daughter, the heir to the throne. If she trusted the wrong being, the whole empire could fall. The queen leaned closer over the railing of the high balcony, her voice low, commanding, meant only for her guards. "Let him continue," she said. The guards froze, shocked by her words, but obeyed. They did not move, they did not strike. For now the human was spared, but she was not done. This was only the beginning of her test. She wanted to see his patience. She wanted to see his strength. And above all, she wanted to see his truth. The girl twirled beneath the floating lights, her fear forgotten, her joy shining like a beacon. Daniel laughed softly with her, not knowing that every smile, every move, every word was being weighed like gold. The queen's fingers brushed the edge of her throne where her power pulsed. Memories of war filled her mind. Humans leading armies, burning cities, breaking promises. She had sworn never to trust them again. And yet her daughter's laughter was breaking that vow with every second. A storm raged inside her. One voice told her to kill him now, to end the risk. Another voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, this one was different. And the queen hated that second voice most of all. She turned to her guards, her eyes burning like stars. "Watch him," she ordered. "Do not let him leave. Do not let him escape. Not until I decide." Her words carried the weight of 1,000 executions. The guards bowed, trembling even in their armor. Below, Daniel wiped a tear from the girl's cheek. He thought it was simple kindness. But to the queen, it was a blade cutting into her certainty. For the first time in many years, she did not know what decision to make. The hall shimmered with bubbles. The child laughed in freedom. And high above, the queen stood between rage and wonder. Her heart, chained by duty, but shaken by what she saw. The queen of a mighty empire, feared across galaxies, now faced her greatest question. Could one human change everything? Or was this nothing but another dangerous lie? and as the bubbles floated higher, her decision grew heavier. The game of fate had begun, and the queen was the one writing the rules. A fragile bond. The hall was no longer silent. Where there had once been fear and shadows, now there was light and laughter. The bubbles floated through the air like tiny stars, fragile and bright. The little girl spun in circles, her small hands reaching for every shining sphere. Daniel watched her with gentle eyes. He had no weapon in his hand, no shield on his arm, only patience, only kindness, and in that moment it was enough. The girl stopped crying. Her tears dried as quickly as they had come. She looked up at the strange human with wide, glowing eyes. For the first time, she did not see a threat. She saw someone who made her feel safe. She touched his sleeve, pulling softly. "More," she whispered in her own language. The sound was strange, sharp, and musical. Daniel did not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. He smiled and nodded, blowing another stream of bubbles into the air. The girl laughed again, her voice echoing across the grand hall. It was a fragile sound, but it carried power. Even the guards in the shadows felt it. They shifted uncomfortably, unused to such joy within the cold walls of their queen's palace. High above, the queen's eyes narrowed. Her heart twisted with emotions she refused to name. For years her daughter had lived in fear, surrounded by servants and warriors, but never warmth, and now in the hands of an outsider, a human, she smiled. The queen's silence grew heavier, each breath a war inside her chest. The girl moved closer to Daniel. She touched a bubble as it floated down. The bubble burst against her small fingers, leaving nothing but a shimmer of light. She gasped and giggled, then looked at him with trust shining in her eyes. A fragile bond had been born, so small yet so dangerous. Daniel lowered himself to one knee. He kept his hands open, empty, to show he meant no harm. He pointed at his chest. "Daniel," he said slowly, his voice calm. Then he pointed gently at her, asking without words. The girl hesitated, then whispered her name, soft and trembling. The sound carried upward, and the queen's fingers tightened on her throne. No outsider had ever been given her daughter's name until now. The moment was delicate. Like glass balancing on a blade, the queen leaned forward, her heart pounding though her face stayed cold. Would the human mock the name, twist it, misuse it? But Daniel only repeated it softly, carefully, with respect. The girl smiled wider, her fear melting away. She took his hand in hers, small fingers curling around his rough human skin, and the bond grew stronger. Her trust was a gift, but also a risk, for if this human betrayed it, the queen would destroy him without mercy. The guards whispered among themselves in low voices. They had never seen the princess so close to an outsider. Some wanted to strike him down, to cut the bond before it grew. Others hesitated, afraid of the queen's silence, for if she had not yet spoken, it meant she was watching, judging, waiting. The girl pulled Daniel toward a tall window. Outside, the alien city glowed with strange towers and floating lights. She pointed as if wanting to share the beauty of her world with him. Daniel looked, nodding, showing her he was listening. Even if he could not understand her words, that simple act deepened the bond because sometimes kindness did not need language. The queen's eyes softened for the briefest moment. Memories of her own childhood flickered in her mind. Days long. Before she was queen, when laughter was not rare, when trust was not dangerous, she hated the memory for it made her feel weak. And yet, watching her daughter's joy, she could not turn away, but then the silence broke. A sound of boots echoed down the hall, sharp and heavy. The doors burst open and more guards rushed in, their weapons raised, their eyes burning with rage. They had seen enough. They would not allow a human near their princess. The girl cried out, running to Daniel's side, her small arms wrapped around his arm. The guards froze in shock. They had expected her to flee, to hide, to fear the outsider, but instead she protected him, her little body standing between him and their weapons. The queen stood, her cloak spreading behind her like a storm. The hall shook with her power, her presence alone silencing every voice. The guards dropped to one knee, trembling. The girl held Daniel tighter, her eyes filled with defiance, and Daniel finally realized the child he had comforted was no ordinary girl. She was royalty, and the woman now stepping from the shadows was her mother, the queen of this empire. The fragile bond had been formed, but it was about to be tested. The queen's eyes locked on Daniel, cold as fire, sharp as steel. She spoke at last, her voice rolling like thunder. "Human, explain yourself." The hall fell silent again. The girl clung to him, refusing to let go, and Daniel's next words would decide whether the fragile bond would become unbreakable or shatter into pieces that could never be fixed. The tension rises. The queen's words echoed like thunder through the glowing hall. "Human, explain yourself," she commanded, her voice shaking the air itself. The guards stiffened, their weapons humming with energy. The girl held Daniel's arm tighter, her small fingers digging into his sleeve, refusing to let go. Daniel stood frozen. For the first time he realized the full weight of where he was. Not just in a strange hall, not just beside a frightened child, but standing before the queen of an empire, a woman feared across galaxies. Her eyes burned with cold fire. Her crown shimmered with the power of 1,000 victories. And yet Daniel did not see only the ruler. He saw the mother. He saw the way her gaze never left her daughter, the way her anger was tangled with worry. He swallowed hard, his voice calm, but steady. "I only wanted to help," he said, his words simple, his tone without fear. The queen narrowed her eyes, her voice sharp as a blade. "Help or deceive?" she asked, her words cutting the silence. "Humans do not help without reason," the guards growled, their weapons raised higher. Some demanded his execution, their voices fierce. "Your Majesty, let us strike him down now," one shouted. But the queen lifted her hand and silence fell again. No one dared disobey her command. The girl stepped forward, her glowing eyes wide and determined. She pointed at Daniel, then looked up at her mother. Her voice trembled, but she spoke clearly. "He made me smile," she said. The hall froze at her words. The guards looked at each other in disbelief, for the princess rarely spoke, rarely smiled, rarely trusted anyone, but here she stood defending a stranger. The queen's chest tightened, though her face remained cold. The sight of her daughter standing against her own guards shook her deeply. But she could not show weakness, not here, not before her people. Her power was her shield, her throne was her weapon, and yet her daughter's voice pierced both. Daniel raised his hand slowly, showing he held no weapon. "I mean no harm," he said softly. "I found her afraid. I only wanted to comfort her." His words were simple, but they carried weight, because they were true. The queen's eyes narrowed further. She studied every movement, every breath, every blink. Her silence pressed heavier than stone. The guards shifted nervously, waiting for her judgment. The girl's grip on Daniel's hand did not loosen. Then, suddenly, the silence broke. The doors of the hall slammed open again. Another squad of guards rushed in, armored in silver and black. They had not seen the queen's hesitation. They only saw a human standing close to their princess. They roared in anger and charged. The girl screamed, pulling Daniel back. The guards' weapons glowed, ready to strike. Daniel's instincts screamed at him to run, but the girl was still beside him. He could not leave her. He would not leave her. He stepped in front of her, shielding her with his own body. The guards lunged, their energy blades raised high, but before the strike could fall, the hall itself trembled. A force like a storm slammed through the air. Every guard was thrown, back crashing against the walls, their weapons flying from their hands. The queen had moved. Her eyes blazed like suns, her power shaking the very pillars of the palace. Her voice roared through the chamber. "Enough!" Silence followed. The guards lay trembling, too afraid to rise. Daniel stood frozen, the girl still clinging to him. The queen descended from her high throne, her steps slow but unstoppable. Her cloak flowed behind her like living darkness. Each step made the air heavier. Each breath made the room colder. The girl looked up at her mother, her voice small but brave. Please do not hurt him, she begged. The queen paused, her sharp eyes flickering between her daughter and the human, her heart a storm of fire and ice. She wanted to destroy him, to end the danger. But her daughter's trembling voice held her hand still. She stopped in front of Daniel, her height towering over him, her presence crushing like a mountain. She leaned close, her voice low and dangerous. You stand in the heart of my empire, she said. You stand before the ruler of worlds, before the mother of the child you touched. Give me one reason not to break you where you stand. The hall was silent again. Every guard held their breath. The girl's eyes filled with tears, afraid of what would happen next, and Daniel, though his legs trembled, stood tall, his voice calm, his words simple. Because she needed me, he said. Not as a soldier, not as a queen's daughter, not as royalty, but as a child. The queen's eyes flashed, her rage clashing with something deeper. Her daughter's small voice joined his, trembling but clear. He is kind, she said. He is different. The fragile bond between them grew stronger in that moment. A bond the queen could not ignore. A bond that made her doubt. A bond that made her wonder. Was this human truly dangerous? Or was he the key to something her empire had long forgotten? The queen raised her hand, her decision burning within her. The guards waited, the child prayed, the human stood ready, and the hall trembled with suspense. For whatever she chose now would decide not only his fate, but the fate of their world. The queen's judgment. The queen's hand hung in the air, heavy with power. The hall trembled, the guards knelt low, the child clung tighter to the human's arm. Every eye was fixed on the ruler of worlds, waiting for her choice. Would she end the intruder or allow him to walk away alive? Her gaze locked on Daniel, piercing through him like a blade. You claim to help her, she said, her voice slow and dangerous. You claim kindness, though your kind has brought only pain to mine. Words are easy, human, but trust is not. Her words cut through, the air like thunder. The guards nodded fiercely, their voices low. Yes, Majesty, no trust in humans, no mercy, they muttered. But the queen raised her hand again and silenced them all. The girl stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong. He is different, she whispered. He made me laugh. He made me safe. Her words echoed across the hall. The queen's eyes flickered for the briefest moment, for no one, not even her own council, had made her daughter speak so boldly. The queen turned her gaze back to Daniel. If you are different, she said, coldly, then you will prove it. Her cloak swept across the marble floor as she circled him like a predator. You will face a trial, human, one that no outsider has ever survived. The guards lifted their heads in shock. Whispers filled the chamber. The trial of the heart, one muttered. No human can endure it, said another. Daniel's chest tightened, though his face stayed calm. He had no idea what trial she spoke of, but he knew it would not be easy. The queen's voice carried like fire. This is not a test of strength nor of power, she said. It is a test of truth. If you pass, you may leave this hall alive. If you fail, not even the memory of your name will remain. The child gasped, her glowing eyes wide with fear. No, mother, she begged, tugging at the queen's cloak. Do not hurt him. The queen looked down at her daughter, her expression unreadable. Then she looked back at Daniel, her voice sharp as ice. If he is what he claims, child, then he will endure. Two guards stepped forward, their armor clanging as they approached. They seized Daniel's arms, pulling him toward the center of the hall. The child cried out and tried to follow, but the queen's hand lifted gently. Stay, she commanded, and though her voice was soft, it carried the weight of a storm. Daniel's heart pounded as he was forced to his knees, but his eyes stayed fixed on the queen. What is your trial? He asked, his voice calm despite the iron grip of the guards. The queen's lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile. You will not fight with weapons, she said. You will not fight with lies. You will face what you fear most, and if your heart breaks, you will be destroyed. The hall grew darker, the walls glowing with a strange light. The queen raised her hand and symbols burned into the floor beneath Daniel. The air grew heavy, alive with energy. The guard stepped back, afraid to stand too close. The child sobbed, reaching for him, but the queen held her firm. "This is my judgment," the queen declared. "Pass, and you may yet live. Fail, and you will die as all liars should." Her eyes locked on him, unblinking, merciless. "Let the trial begin." The floor shook beneath Daniel. The light around him twisted, bending the hall into shadows. He felt his body pulled into something deeper, a place not bound by walls or time. He gasped, his vision spinning, his mind dragged into darkness, and then he was no longer in the hall. He stood in a different place, one that felt too real to be illusion, a place filled with memories, with fear, with loss. The queen's trial had begun. Above it all, she watched with silent eyes. Her daughter pressed against her side, tears running down her cheeks. "Mother," she whispered, "please stop." But the queen's face stayed cold. Inside, her heart twisted, but her voice remained steel. "If he is true, he will survive," she whispered. "If he is false, he will break." The guards knelt low, the hall filled with silence. Only the girl's sobs and the queen's burning eyes remained. For the fate of the human and the fragile bond he had built would now be decided by the trial of the heart, and as the darkness swallowed Daniel, one truth remained. This was no longer only his trial, it was the queen's as well. For if he passed, her world would change forever, and if he failed, her daughter's heart might break beyond repair. Trial of trust. The world around Daniel twisted into shadows. The glowing palace hall melted away like smoke. The air turned cold, heavy, filled with whispers that crawled inside his mind. He tried to move, but the ground beneath him felt endless, like he stood on nothing at all. This was the queen's trial. It was not made of stone or steel. It was made of fear. Fear pulled from the heart, shaped into something real. Daniel's breath came heavy. Around him, shapes formed, familiar shapes, painful ones. He saw earth burning, his home covered in fire and smoke. He saw faces of people he loved reaching for him, begging for help. And no matter how far he ran, he could not reach them. The whispers grew louder, cruel and sharp. "You cannot save them," they hissed. "You are weak. You are nothing. You are only human." The voices pressed down on him like chains, but Daniel clenched his fists, his voice breaking through the dark. "I will not give up," he said. Even when no one could hear, he spoke the words, high above. In the real hall, the queen's eyes glowed as she watched. Her power connected her to the trial, showing her every vision he faced. Her daughter clung to her arm, her voice shaking. "Mother, stop this, please," she begged. But the queen's jaw tightened, her heart at war with itself. "If he is true, he must endure," she said, though her voice cracked on the last word. Inside the trial, the shadows shifted. The burning earth faded, replaced by something worse. The little alien girl stood before Daniel, her glowing eyes filled with fear. She was trapped inside a cage of fire, reaching for him. "Help me," she cried, her voice breaking. Daniel's heart pounded. His legs moved before he thought. He ran toward her, but the closer he came, the farther she seemed. The fire burned hotter, tearing at his skin. The whispers returned, sharper, crueler. "She is not your child, she is not your people," they hissed. "Leave her, save yourself, she is nothing to you." Daniel's body shook, the heat biting into him, but his voice roared back through the pain. "She is a child," he shouted. "She is scared, and I will not leave her." He pushed forward, the fire tearing at his arms. Step by step, he fought through the pain, until finally, he reached her hand, and with one desperate pull, he tore her from the cage. The fire vanished, the shadows broke apart. Daniel gasped, falling to his knees, holding the girl close. But as he looked down, she was gone. It had only been another vision, another test. Still, his arms trembled, as though she had truly been there. In the hall, the queen's eyes widened for the first time in years. Her guards whispered in shock. No one. No outsider has endured so far, one muttered. The queen silenced them with a look, but her own heart was unsteady, for she had seen his choice. He had chosen her daughter's life, even when the trial gave him reason to abandon her. The darkness shifted again. Now Daniel stood before the queen herself. Her eyes in this vision burned brighter than fire, her voice like a storm. You think you can earn my trust? The illusion queen said. You think kindness is enough to heal the wounds your people left behind? Choose, human, your life or hers. The girl appeared again, standing beside the illusion queen. This time, chains wrapped around her tiny body, glowing with cruel light. The illusion queen raised a blade of energy, sharp and merciless. If you step forward, you will die. The vision hissed. If you step back, you will live. But she will not. Daniel's heart pounded like thunder. Every instinct told him to survive, but when he looked at the child, her glowing eyes wide with terror, he did not hesitate. He stepped forward, one step, then another, until the blade was at his chest. I will not. Leave her, he said, his voice steady. If she falls, I fall. The illusion shattered. The blade dissolved into light. The chains around the girl broke into dust, and the shadows finally cracked, tearing apart with a scream of defeated darkness. Daniel fell to his knees again, gasping, his body trembling. But his eyes stayed open, his voice still steady. He had passed in the real hall, the symbols on the floor burned bright, then vanished. Daniel collapsed onto the cold marble, but he was alive. The girl broke free from her mother's grasp and ran to him. She threw her arms around him, sobbing with relief. The guards gasped, unable to believe what they saw. The queen stood frozen, her face calm, but her heart roaring like a storm. She had seen everything, every choice he made, every step into the fire, and what she saw shook her more than any war she had fought. The hall fell silent. The guards waited for her command. The child clung to the human, and the Queen of Worlds stared at Daniel. For the first time in centuries, she did not know whether to call him enemy or something far more dangerous. A friend, a new beginning. The trial was over. The light faded, the shadows vanished, and silence filled the grand hall. Daniel knelt on the cold floor, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The little girl held on to him, refusing to let go, her glowing eyes shining with tears and relief. Around them, the guards remained frozen. None dared to speak. None dared to move. They had seen the impossible. A human had survived the trial of the heart. No outsider had ever done so. Not once, not in all of history. The queen stood still at the edge of the throne steps, her cloak trailing across the marble, her crown burning with light. Her face remained calm, but her eyes were storms. Inside, her chest, two voices raged. One demanded she end him now before he grew into a threat. The other whispered that perhaps this man was different. She had seen his choices. She had seen him walk into fire for her daughter. She had seen him choose her child's life over his own. And though she hated the thought, though she resisted it with every breath, the truth was clear. He had passed. The queen raised her hand. Every guard dropped to their knees at once, their weapons lowered. The hall fell into perfect silence. Only her voice mattered now. Rise, human, she commanded, her voice heavy like thunder. Daniel struggled to his feet, still weak, but he stood tall. The girl clung to his side, defiant against anyone who would take him away. The queen's gaze fell upon him, cold, sharp, endless. You have endured my trial, she said. You have faced fear, temptation, and pain, and yet you did not break. Few of my own kind could have done the same. The guards shifted nervously, some glaring at him with hatred, others with disbelief, but none dared to speak against their queen. The girl's small hand held tighter to Daniel's, as if her strength could shield him. The queen's eyes flickered for one moment, and for the first time in many years they softened. You are not like the others of your kind, she admitted. Her words echoed through the chamber like a crack in the walls of iron. You showed patience, when violence would have been easier. You gave comfort when fear was stronger, and you risked yourself when survival would have told you to run. Daniel's voice was steady, though his body trembled. I did what anyone should, he said simply. The Queen's lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile, not of warmth but of respect. Then perhaps, she said, you are not anyone. The hall grew tense again. The guards awaited her final judgment. Would she accept him, or would she end him despite his trial? Even the air seemed to hold its breath. The Queen stepped closer, her shadow falling over both Daniel and the child. She looked down at her daughter, who gazed back with shining hope. Then she looked at the human who stood tall despite the weight of her gaze, her voice lowered, steady and commanding. You live, she said, not by mercy, but by proof. Gasps spread across the guards. The girl cried out with joy, hugging Daniel's arm tighter. But the Queen's words did not end there. Do not mistake this for trust, she continued, her eyes sharp again. You are alive because you endured, because you protected what was not yours, because you proved a heart that even my own warriors lack. But one test does not erase a history of betrayal. Daniel nodded slowly, his voice calm. I understand, he said. The Queen studied him for a long moment, then turned away, her cloak sweeping across the floor like a storm passing. She ascended the steps of her throne once more, but her voice still filled the chamber. You may remain in this city for now, she declared. You will be watched, every step, every breath. But you will live, and my daughter has chosen you as her protector. The girl gasped, her glowing eyes wide. Daniel looked down at her, surprised, but the Queen's voice cut through again. This bond you share is fragile, she said. It may be a bridge or it may be a weapon, and I will know in time which one it is. The hall shook with her final words. The guards bowed, low, their loyalty unquestioned. The girl smiled through her tears, pressing her forehead against Daniel's arm. Daniel stood silent, knowing this was not the end, but only the beginning. The Queen's eyes lingered on them one last time. Behind, her cold gaze, something dangerous stirred. Not hatred, not rage, but something far more uncertain. A question she had not asked in centuries. Could a human truly be more than an enemy? Could he be the key to peace? The hall fell into silence again. The bubbles that once filled the air were gone, but the memory of them remained. Light, fragile, fleeting, yet powerful enough to change the course of empires. The human had survived, the child had smiled, and the Queen, for the first time in a lifetime, had chosen not to destroy. The story was not finished, it was only beginning, for the galaxy had witnessed something unthinkable, a bond between human and alien, a fragile trust that could unite or break, and, somewhere deep inside her heart, though she would never admit it aloud, the Queen knew. Her daughter had found something greater than protection. She had found hope.